We're going to start on 18b. Okay. It's 7 lines from the top. Boy, Rabba Baravor. Naftali, is that correct?
Yes, it is.
Okay, we thank Hashem that we're able to learn every day. We're learning, we should have the basic English. Boy, Rabba Baravua asked a question. Rabba Baravua was an important person, father-in-law of Reb Nachman. His question goes like this: Yid Nesuin Isa Yeris and Isa. When the master marries the slave girl, which was one of the laws that he's supposed to marry the slave girl, does that marriage? He's going to tell her. The Gemara later is going to say, how does he do the marriage? He's going to say, Harei at miyu edesli. Okay, so when he does that, does he become betrothed to her, or does he become married to her? Nesuin Isa Yeris and Isa. What happens when he does that? So, nafkamina, what's the difference? Does he inherit her if she passes away? If he's a Kohen, does he go to the cemetery if she dies? Can he annul her vows alone? How married are they? So what's the halach? Tashimasa, come and listen. The big day, but we go back to mention something that we learned. Had a brisa on Friday. We had a brisa that we discussed the pasuk of the big day, but if he rejects her. One shot was the big day, but meant that he spread the talus over her. That meant he married her. Another shot was that once he sold her once, he can't sell her again as a slave. Okay, so it depends on Yeshem Lemikri, Yeshem Lemasers. Whatever the case is, now we're going to explain like this. The big day, but if his garment is over her, Kivan Shapir's Talisala Shuvener Shaila once he gives her over to marriage. The father can't sell her a second time. That would mean he only can't sell her a second time as a slave. But he can sell her as a wife. That means he can give her over to marriage, which would mean that she's married once because he sold her once as a slave, and the slave master married her, did yid on her. So he's allowed to sell her again and into marriage. He's allowed to give her again into marriage, which means there is marriage after marriage. But that would say that
marriage after marriage or marriage after slavery.
Well, it's a marriage after marriage or marriage after slavery is exactly Rabbi Baravul's question. If the slavery marriage, if that yid marriage is considered nesuin, then that would be marriage after marriage. If that slavery marriage is considered erison, then it's much less. It's only a betrothal. So, but if you say that the first marriage was nesuin, that yid, that slavery type marriage, is considered nesuin, given the nisa shavenra of lavira shuspa. We know the rule that once the woman gets married to her husband, then the father loses his rights over her. So how could you say that he's allowed to sell her again if we would say that the yid is nesuin? So it must be that the yid is erison, elalav shmamina erison. I say must mean that the yid is only a betrothal. And it's not a real marriage, and that's why he's allowed to sell her again. Okay, we seem to have a proof. Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, Rav Nachman Yitzchak says you don't have a proof. Because when you quoted that pasuk and you said the big deba, you thought it was talking about when she was sold into slavery and the master married her. You thought that's what it was talking about. Really, it was talking about just when the father gave her over into marriage without slavery. This was just a regular Kiddushin. What it means is once the father gave her over to someone in marriage, he's not allowed to sell her as a slave. Yeah. Okay. Now, why did we use the pasuk of the big deba? That's a kasha. Big deba was a slavery marriage. Here we're saying that it was just a regular marriage. Once he sells her, I think everyone accepts that once she's given over in marriage, she can never be a slave after marriage. As the father has the rights to his daughter to sell her as a slave or to give her to a husband. If either of those fall apart, the slavery ends or the marriage falls apart, can you then go ahead and do it again when she's still a minor? So that was a machlekes we had before. But I think everyone agreed that once she was given over in marriage, she cannot be a slave after. She cannot be a slave afterwards. If it was a nesuin, then she can't be marriage either. Okay. Tashima, so come and listen. We're looking for another proof because this proof just fell off because we weren't talking about a marriage that came through slavery. We weren't talking about a yid. Ein meicher lekroivim. It says that the sale of a daughter, a slave girl, cannot be sold. She can't be sold to relatives. It has to be sold to people where it's possible to do that type of marriage, which is called yid.
But here's another marriage after that. Or because she's Tana.
No, that's only when the brothers. That's only when the brothers do. So, first opinion holds that you can't sell it to relatives because you need to be able to do yid. Mishum Rabbi Eliezer Amru. In the name of Rabbi Eliezer, they said, you are allowed to sell it to relatives. Tanakama holds that you're not allowed to sell her as a slave to relatives because you won't be able to do that year, that type of marriage that the Torah recommends. Rabbi Eliezer says you are allowed to sell her because you don't have to do that. If it's possible, then you do that type of marriage. If it's not possible, then you don't. But the sale as a slave is perfect. But they both agree that you're allowed to sell her to a forbidden marriage, which is not as bad as selling to relatives. Relatives means that there's no marriage possible. This is just a forbidden marriage. So, for example, you're allowed to sell a widow. Let's say she was married before somehow, and you're selling her to a kohen gadol. Kohen gadol is not allowed to marry a widow. She's under 12, and she's already a widow. Yeah. A lot of experience this girl has. So, or let's say she was already divorced, or she's a chalutza already. So, chalutza means that she was married once to someone, he died, and then she goes to do chalitza with the brother, and now she's being sold to as a slave. She's still under 12, and the slave to a kayan hedin. Now the kayan is not allowed to marry the chalutza or the divorcee, but doesn't mean that if he marries her, he doesn't need a get. He still requires a get. So the Gemara asks like this: how in the world did she become a widow? If you say that it wasn't the father that married her off, she just went over to a guy, and the guy gave her Kiddushin, and it was Kiddushay Katana. It says, Almana Karila, you call her a widow? That was nothing. She has no rights to accept the Kiddushin if her father's still alive. How could she be, how do we know the father's alive? Because he's about to sell her to someone else. So she can't be, she's not a widow at all. Wasn't a marriage. Ella, the kid Shavia, must have been that her father married her off. 1 second. You can't sell her as a slave after the father married her off. What we mean now is we're talking about it was Kedusha Yiyud. How did she become a widow? Because father sold her as a slave. And the slave master marries her. And then the slave master died. Now the father wants to sell her again. And selling her again, there's machlekes if you can sell her to a relative, but everyone agrees you can sell it to a kohen gadol. Okay, now we're following the opinion Rabbi Amram says, name Rabbi Yitzchak, we're talking about the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, who holds that the sale done here, the sale into slavery was done by the father, but the marriage is not done by the father. The father's not marrying her, but the father is not receiving the money for the marriage, which means that it's the master himself that's creating the marriage. In other words, there's two ways of viewing where is the Kiddushin, where is the betrothal here. According to one opinion, we say that the original money that was given is the betrothal money. When she was bought as a slave, that original money was the betrothal money. Now
That went to the father.
It went to the father. Now it gets used up as she works, so it's not really a gift. But if there's money left, because she didn't work all of that time, so if there's money left, then that would be considered the betrothal money.
More than.
It has to be more than a pruta.
So she's not necessarily always betrothed, but she's sold.
That's a slave,
Yeah.
right? It has to take place. The master needs to say, "I want to be betrothed to you." Rabbi Yehuda has a different opinion. He says that the original money is not marriage money; that's just the regular slavery. So how does he do the marriage, the betrothal? What he says is that you don't have to continue working. It's not the betrothal money. It's something that between him and her, that value he's giving to her. Well, now, what's the benefit of that? What do we gain by this? This is not considered.
We get the money. There's no money.
There's no money. So because we have a rule that there's no slavery after marriage, right? That's the rule. But the only thing is that that's only if the father sold her into marriage. But here, the father sold her into slavery. The marriage was performed only between the master and the girl, not by the father. So in such a case, we can say that there's slavery after such a marriage, because this is really just slavery after slavery. If it would have been, if the father gave her into marriage and then the marriage ended, he can't sell her as a slave. But here, the father sold her as a slave. Then there was a marriage that took place, but that was just a Kiddushin Yid. It was like this quasi type marriage. And it wasn't really the father that made it, that gave her as a wife. Okay. So now we have to discuss back to our question. Rabba Baravor. And I say, if you say that Yud creates a full marriage, once she's fully married, the father can't sell her anyway. I said, it must mean that it only does Erison, it only does a betrothal. The Shavin, Shemaichra, and everyone agrees that you're allowed to sell her as a almana l'kayin gadol. The almana widow can go to kayin gadol. But you're not allowed to sell into slavery after marriage. We got well, how are you going to answer that? Shani Erison Dida. We're going to say that when she does a Erison, that's going to be different. Erison Davia, that's different than if the father sells her into marriage. So, but this was her own. This was Yud. Afilu tema nesuin. I said, Shani nesuin Dida nesuin Davia. Here you don't have any proof. What are we trying to say? Trying to say it must be that it's only Erison. And that's why the father is allowed to sell her again. So the Gemara says, but you can't sell her after Erison either. It says, no, but this is not a real Erison. This is not a real betrothal. This is a betrothal that takes place only between the master and her. It's not from the father. So he said, so then once you say that, then you have no proof that it's only betrothal. Maybe it's really a marriage. And we can say that there's a difference between when she does the marriage and when her father does the marriage. I'm finding these Gemaras are very logical, like in these types of arguments. It's like you think you have an answer, and then it tells you that 1 second. If you analyze it, it's very analytical. Well,
When it's the case where she marries the master, not receiving. He only got the money when he sold it to save.
Right. Now there's two opinions. One opinion says that the money that he got when he sold her into slavery was the betrothal money. And one opinion is that it's not the betrothal money.
Could it be that she works the amount that she was sold for, and then like the other opinion says is that she doesn't have to work anymore? That would be the benefit that she gets.
No, once she works off all the money, the 6 years, then it's too late.
What if like the day before the 6 years?
Oh, so that would be fine, as long as there's a pruta worth it. If there's still a pruta there. Yeah. Okay.
What happens if during the 6 years she did overtime?
Slave.
And
There's no such
finished.
thing as slavery overtime by a
But
slave.
aren't we saying that it's like a certain estimation of how much? How's a person sold for a certain amount of time? We estimate the value of the person versus the work they're going to do.
Right.
If they worked extra, every day they have to finish at 5. This one wanted to work it off. So you know what? I'll work every night until 7, 2 hours every day. I can take off for 6 months or something, whatever.
Yeah.
And then if she still stays, that's the value that she's getting.
We had discussions about the hanaka, the gift that you give to the slave, should be based on how much blessing came to the house. So, but I still think that a slave is sold no matter what. It's like we're hiring workers. Some of them are better than others, but that's what you paid for the hour. Some of them do a better job, and not, there's a certain price that you get, and all of that other stuff is just like mazel. So I feel we could still make a distinction between if it was really Nasuin. Basically, we're not able to answer Rabbi Barabo's question. Gemara says, "Hi Mai." So what are we left with? 1 second. Hi Mai. What do you mean? Bishlaima, Erison, May Erison, Shani. It's possible to say that there's 2 types of betrothals. One type of betrothal is when the father does it. Oh, that's very serious. One type of betrothal is when the master does it, betrothal directly to the girl. So that's not so serious. So there could still be a slavery after such a thing. However, Bishlaime Erison Erison Shani, Elanasuin Minasuin Mishani. Are you going to say that there's a difference between marriages? That this is a serious marriage, this is not a serious marriage? Marriage is marriage. Betrothal, you could say that maybe it wasn't as serious, but the marriage, you have to say that it's always going to be a marriage. And it doesn't matter if the father took the money or if the father didn't. If it's a marriage, then there should be no sale afterwards. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak the Amar afilu the Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda moyes rishonos the Kiddushin etnu the Mai Mukama. According to Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, we have Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak before. You have the charts. Further on. Further on, we're going to have Nachman Yitzchak holds that even according to Rabbi Yossi bar Rabbi Yehuda, the original money is given for the marriage. So how is he going to establish this? How is he going to say that you're able to marry, that you're able to sell an almana to a kain gadol? How's it possible? You already did an erison, and it was the father who did the marriage. And there should be no slavery after marriage. He's going to follow that unique opinion of Rabbi Eliezer. There's one unique opinion, which is the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer that holds that only slavery after slavery is not allowed, but slavery after marriage is yes allowed. And we were ignoring this opinion the whole time. Rashi says why we're ignoring it, because this is the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer, which Rabbi Eliezer is a student of Shammai and it's called Shamuti. And so we were just ignoring his opinion. In all of this discussion, we were ignoring that. But now we're going to have to say, because we're stuck, we're going to say that he's following the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer. Boirish Lakish. Now, Did we answer the question? Let me just see 1 second. It seems like our answer was that it needs to be Arison. The yid only does an Arison, it doesn't do a marriage. Because we're not able to distinguish between a marriage that's done by the father or a marriage that's done by the master. It's marriage that's done by the girl versus marriage that's done by the father. We're not able to distinguish. And if there's any possibility of a girl being sold into slavery after a marriage, it would only be possible if it was Kiddushin Yid, and it was in the Yid only is only a betrothal. That's the only possibility. Therefore, it seems that we've answered that Rabbi Baruch's question: what is Yid? Is it a betrothal or is it a marriage? It's a betrothal. Irish Lakish. Lakish has a question. We know that when it comes to Yid, it's either the father, which means the master, is able to marry the slave girl, or his son can marry the slave girl. Let's say his son is 9 years old. 9 years old is already eligible to have relations, but he's still considered a minor. So would that be acceptable? It says his son, and that means any type of son, even if it's a minor. Maybe it means a son, but it gets real. It's a son similar to him. It needs to be an adult son. Amar Reb Zera. So Reb Zera is going to try to answer the question of Rish Lakish. Tashima, come and listen. It says in the Torah that if a man is going to have relations with a married woman, so it says a man, prat lekatan. That's excluding if it's a child. The laws of adultery don't apply if it's a child. Ashiyina feshesis, that's going to commit adultery with a woman that's married to a man, prat leishas katan, that's excluding if the woman is married to a child, to a minor man. V'amrit miyayid imkin matzinu ishas lekatan. 1 second. Why did we just exclude adultery to a woman that's married to a minor? Why did we exclude that from the rules of adultery? Because there's no marriage. But if you want to develop here a case that maybe there's a possibility of a marriage to a minor, how would that be? Because the slave girl is allowed to marry the son of the master, even when he's a minor. So we have a case of marriage to a minor. So why is there no adultery there?
So a minor man cannot be
married. Right. So, Velamai, so rather, what do you want to say? That you can't do yid when, right? We excluded from the rules of adultery if the husband is a minor, because we are assuming that there's no such thing as marriage. So then, but if we have a case where there is a marriage, where the husband is a minor, for example, yid, where it says that him or his son is allowed to marry this girl, then we would come back to the cases of adultery. So the Gemara says, okay, so in order to answer that question, we're going to say that there's no yid by a child. Because the son has to be an adult. Yeah, so a child can't do yid. Then why do I need a pasuk to tell me that there's no adultery there? There's no such thing, there's no marriage. Of course there's no adultery. So tifshit minei demiyayid. That tells me that obviously there is such thing as a marriage, and it's coming to tell me the chiddush that even though there is a marriage, but it's not considered adultery when someone else, or doesn't go under the rules of the death penalty of adultery when it's a minor. So we seem to have an answer that according to Reish Lakish's question, that a child can do yid, the son, even though he's a minor. Rav Ashi says no, we're not. It's not talking about yid. That was the only case we could come up with. But if we can come up with another case, then we don't need that. Rav Ashi says we have another case. Hacha biyavam ben teisha shana v'yemecha abal yavam teyaskina de mederaisa chazilei. We're talking about that this woman was originally married to this child's brother, and the husband died. And now she becomes a widow, and comes along the brother-in-law, the remaining brother, who's under 12, 9 years old, has relations with her. And the rule with Yivam is that the relations itself creates the marriage. And so therefore now we have a marriage to, even though the husband's a minor. And so the Torah says that if someone commits adultery with this woman, so it's not, doesn't go under the same category of adultery. The midaraisa chazilei. I'm sorry?
Relations themselves doesn't create a marriage, just in a case.
Only in Yavam, yeah. It could create a marriage, but we're saying that by a minor, it won't create a marriage. It's only by the Yavam that it will. By a minor. I could have thought that since midaraisa, they're fit to get marriage, they're fit to get married. In his intimacy, his relations is considered relations. And someone that lives with her, with this married woman now, is going to be considered that he committed adultery with the married woman. Kamash Malana comes to teach us that it doesn't go under the category of adultery. Okay. Basically, what we answered over here is that we do have a case where there is a case of a child husband, and nevertheless it's still not adultery. Well, what does that go back? What does that tell me about yiyud? Is there a possibility of yiyud by a child? Can the master's son that's underage do yiyud? So when it says my havi Allah, what's the answer to Rish Lakish? Well, Tashima, come and listen. Amar of Evo, Amar of Yanai. Rav Evo says in the name of Rabbi Yanai, Ein yiyud ela begadol, ein yiyud ela midas. Yiyud can only be this type of marriage with the slave girl can only be when with an adult, and it can only be with intention. Gemara says, 1 second, Tarti, you have to tell that to me twice. If it's with a child, it's impossible to have intention because we consider the intention of a child to be nothing. So you basically repeated yourself. You said it needs to be with an adult, it needs to be with intention. Well, of course, if all you had to tell me is it needs to be with intention, and then I would know it needs to be an adult. The matam kamer, what it really means is not telling me two things, it's telling me the reason why it needs to be an adult. Matam and yidel begadol, what's the reason why it needs to be an adult? Because it needs to be with the intention of the husband, of the master. Ibayasema, I can give you another pshat over here. Why did he say it twice? My midas, what does it mean intention? Midas dida, it needs to be her intention. She needs to have intention for this. The Tani Abaya Breder Abavo, because Abaya, the son of Rabavo, taught this is a different Abaya. Asher la yada, that he did not do this type of marriage. Malamet shetzricha liyada, that means that he is required to do this marriage. Hu Tani la v'hu amala. Now he taught this, and he also explained what it means. He explains b'kiddusha yiyod v'aliba de Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda damar mars rishonis lab l'kiddushin nitna. Why do we need her intention? Because when the father was given the money for the sale of his daughter into slavery, that money was not considered Kiddushin. So if the father did the Kiddushin, then I don't need her intention. But since the father didn't do the Kiddushin, she's the one that's accepting the Kiddushin, so now I do need her intention. Yeah, that's what it's saying. Midaita, midas, it needs to be her intention. Because this was Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda's view, that says that the marriage is taking place because he's forgoing on the remaining slavery time. But the original money was not, did not go for this. Did not go for the marriage. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak says, this is what we mentioned before on top of the page. Even if you say that the original money was given for Kiddushin, the Torah says, the Torah says yada, and I still need intention. I still need her intention because the word yada is the same as the word das, deya. Yud ayin daled hey. If you switch around the letters, it means you could switch it to deya, which means intention.
So additional money?
No additional money. He says she doesn't have to finish working. That would be enough. Okay, we mentioned Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda a bunch of times over here that he holds that the original money, at least according to most opinions, the original money was not the Kiddushin money. It was only that the master forgoes on the remaining service that she's required. My Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda, what is this Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda that you keep telling me about? The Tanya was taught in a brisa. It says Yada v'hefta. It says that he will marry her and he'll redeem her, which means he has to perform this marriage with enough time left in the day that he would have been able to redeem her, which means that she's working for 6 years. After 5 years and 364 days, he decides that he's going to marry her. So there has to be enough time left on that last day that there would have been a shava pruta of her service that he's able to do this. If she would be able to do a shava pruta worth of work of service, she's married, and if not, she's not married. Obviously, the original money was not given for Kiddushin. It's only with the service that's left that's the Kiddushin. Rav Nachman Yitzchak says that's not necessarily so. Even if the original money was given for Kiddushin, but I have a pasuk that says that it needs to be done at a time when she could still be redeemed. It doesn't have to do with if the original money was yes Kiddushin money or not Kiddushin money. The main point is that it says in the pasuk she's redeemed and it says that she's married. That like juxtaposition of those terms tell me that the marriage can only take place when she's still eligible for redemption. Amar Rava, Amar Rav Nachman. Rabbi says the name of Rav Nachman. Amar Adam Labita Ketana. Rabbi is going to tell us these this random halachas that we get from these things. It says a person can tell his daughter, says Tzi v'kabli Kiddushin. Go and accept the money of Kiddushin that so and so is going to be giving. Well, who does the money go to? The money goes to the father. But the daughter is the shliach to accept her own Kiddushin money. Now, Midir Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda, and he proves this from Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda. How does he prove it from Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda? Lav Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda Meiser Rishon Lav Kiddushin Nitnu. Don't we see Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda holds that the money that was given to the father is not Kiddushin money. So where is the Kiddushin? When there's a coin left over, not a coin, when there's a value of a coin left over, have a Kiddushin. Now, who's supposed to be getting the money of Kiddushin? It's supposed to be going to the father. So what's happening here? The daughter is taking the money. You see, the daughter can take the money on behalf of the father, and that's still going to work. So if that's the case, then a father can tell his daughter, go collect your Kiddushin money for me, and that's going to work. You see, the father doesn't get the money of Kiddushin. The father got the money from the sale, but the Kiddushin money is really supposed to go to the father. So where is the Kiddushin money in Yud according to Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda? It's that when he forgoes on that last service, but the father doesn't get anything from that. The father already had the money. So who's taking the money? It's the daughter that's taking the money, but that's considered that on behalf of she's taking it on behalf of the father. It's Kiddushin. So the father can send his daughter and say, take Kiddushin money on my behalf. Okay, that's one din of Rava. Another din of Rava, Amar Rava, Amar Rav Nachman. Rava says in the name of Rav Nachman another halacha. Mekadesh b'milva sheishala mashkin. If there's a debt that this girl owes to this man, the rule is that normally Mekadesh b'milva, if the creditor, the lender, was the man, says you don't have to pay me back, it's not considered a Kiddushin. But if there was a mashkin there, if the girl had given the collateral and he gives the collateral back to her, that could be a Kiddushin. Okay. Now, How do we see this? Rabbi Yossi bar Rabbi Yehuda. We see this from Rabbi Yossi bar Rabbi Yehuda. Lavam Rabbi Yossi bar Rabbi Yehuda. Ma'aser Yisrael Slav Kiddushin Nitnu. Don't we see originally the original money that was given to the father is not Kiddushin money. That's just a regular sale for slavery. So which means that now the girl now owes the master work, which is sort of like a debt that she has to work off. So hi halvahi. There's a debt there. Vihi gufa mashkani. And she herself is given to the master as a collateral for her to work off that debt. Okay. Now v'chi mishaya b'shava pruta. And when there's a little bit of work that's left, umiyayad, and he says that you don't have to finish that off. Basically, he's giving her back the collateral of the Kiddushin.
So she won't have to work.
She doesn't have to do the end of the work. So then it is a Kiddushin. So so over here also, if there's a loan with a collateral and he gives back the collateral, that would be a Kiddushin. Tanar Rabbanan, starting a brayso, Kesad mitzvahs yid. How does yid work? Yeah, yid is this marriage that takes place between the master and the slave girl. Amala b'fnei shnaim, he says in front of two people. The Bach adds in here some words. He says in front of two people, Harayat miyuadisli, you are designated for me. Harayat mikudeshesli, you are like separated, distinguished from me, sanctified. Harayat muresesli, you're betrothed to me. Yeah, betrothed, and mereses is literally betrothed. Mikudeshes means like consecrated. Afilu b'seif sheish, even if it's the end of the 6 years. Afilu samach l'shkiya sachama, even if it's right before sunset. And he behaves with her as a wife instead of like a slave. Don't ask what's the difference. Don't ask that. So, right. So, Rabbi Yossi bar Rabbi Yehuda says, it can't be the very last moment. It has to be enough time left in the day that there was a value of a pruta service. And if not, it's not good. So the machlek is here, if there has to be enough time left in the day for her to serve the value of a pruta for the year to work. Mashal la'imer, when it says over here mashal, it really means from this we see. Usually mashal means the opposite. It says mashal, an example of this is, and here it's the opposite. Here we're taking from this and we're learning something else. Okay. La'imer la'ish, if someone says to a woman, be married to me from now to after 30 days. In other words, after 30 days, the marriage should take place retroactively from now. And someone else comes and marries her within those 30 days. What should be the halacha? She married to the first guy or to the second guy? Shemechadeshes the rishon that she's married to the first guy. Okay. Now the Gemara says, like, where did you get this from? Mashal Laman. Where are you taking this from? According to which opinion? Ilay Mashal Rabbi Yossi bar Rabbi Yehuda. Are you taking this from Rabbi Yossi bar Rabbi Yehuda? Rabbi Yossi bar Rabbi Yehuda only said that the marriage is taking place now at the very last moment. You're telling me that the marriage took place retroactively. It's a mashal. It's being derived from the rabbis, because the rabbis said that the original money was given for the Kiddushin money. It was given as the betrothal. So therefore, it's all retroactive. Okay, if it's retroactive, so then the first marriage is the one that's valid, not the second one. Gemara says, Pshita, that's so obvious, you don't even need to tell this to me. Mao, the Gemara says, it's not so obvious. I could have thought, in the example,
It says from now, it's not just only.
What happened in the example? He says, over there he said, from now. Oh, in the example he said from now, but according to the Rabbanan, according to when in the story, the father never said me'achshav. Could have thought that even without the me'achshav. No, you see, in the example that we get out of this, we have a me'achshav l'achar shleishim yom. But since in the actual in the story that we have with the selling her as a slave, he doesn't say that the me'achshav sells her as a slave, and then later on the yiyud is performed and it's automatically me'achshav. It automatically goes back retroactive. So I could have thought the way that it should work as well, if someone gives money and he doesn't say me'achshav, he just says you should be married to me after 30 days. I could have thought the same thing should apply, just like by slavery.
Right.
He doesn't have to say me'achshav and it still works. Kamash Malon, that he has to say me'achshav. In order for the first marriage to work, it needs to say from now and after 30 days. If he just says after 30 days and someone else comes in and does a marriage, then it would be the second person's marriage that works. And I would have thought not like that. I would have thought that it would be the first person's marriage. Why? Because when he gives the money, when the master gives the money to the father, that's considered Kiddushin money, even though he doesn't say me'achshav. Okay.
That's the Chiddush,
The
basically.
Chiddush is that I have to say me'achshav. Yeah, because he said that it's going to take place later on. Tanyidach. We have another brisa. Meicher Spite. Someone that sells his daughter into slavery. And then he goes and takes money for Kiddushin from someone else.
While she's a slave.
While she's a slave. So Sichik Badan, he can just laugh at the original purchaser, the master. Mekadesh is Lashani, and she's married to the second one. Div Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda, that's the opinion of Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda. Chum say it's not so. If the master wants to do yiyud, he can do yiyud, and the master can marry her.
Not the father.
Not the father's sale. The master still has the rights to it. And we can learn from this that if someone tells a woman, you should be married to me after 30 days, and someone else comes and marries her within 30 days, she's married to the second person. Exactly the opposite of the case that we said before. What's the difference? Over there we said me'achshav, over here we didn't say me'achshav. Mashal Aman, who's this following? Are you following the rabbis? According to the rabbis, the first one is the one that's married. Ella Ravacha, the son of Rava says, Mashal Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda. This is derived from Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda. Gemara says, Pshita, of course it's Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda. Of course, according to Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda, this would be the rule, because the first marriage doesn't take place until the end, right? Because I could have thought over there, he never even told her after 30 days. What would I have said?
That the first one was.
Why does Rabbi Yossi? Why would Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda say that she's married to the second one? Because we never mentioned anything about marriage yet. But if you would say that you're married after 30 days, then maybe that would automatically be a me'achshav, would automatically be a retroactive. Kamash Malan, it comes to teach us that there is no automatic retroactive. Either you say me'achshav or you don't say it. But just to say you're married to me after 30 days does not go back retroactively without saying that it should take place from now. Okay. Tanya Yidach, we have another brisa. Meicheres Bitai, someone sells his daughter into slavery, Upasak Almanash Liyayit, and he says, but I don't want any marriage over here, none of that business. This is pure slavery, pure slavery, no marriage. The Skayim Atanai, Reb Meir says that his condition is valid, and they can't do with the year. Reb Meir, that's the words of Reb Meir. Chum say, the Chum say no. If he wants to do, he could still do yid. Why? because he made a condition on something that it says in the Torah, and tonight battle, because conditions that are violating what commandments in the Torah are not really conditions. The Rab Meir tonight Kayam, the Gemara challenges, according to Rab Meir, it is a good condition. But Tanya, but we have a brisa. Tonight battle, the Rab Meir. Rabbi Yehuda, let's say someone marries a woman. He says, I'm marrying you, but I just want to tell you that this marriage is on condition that I don't have to be intimate with you, and I don't have to pay for your things, and I don't have to, give you food or clothing.
Oh.
So that's the, what's it called? A prenup. Okay. So Rabbi Meir says that they're married, but the condition is
19
nullified. 19 billion.
Towards the end.
The condition is that you're ahead of us like this time?
No, the ink came out,
Oh.
the highlighting came out once. I thought it was a different document.
So it may be a different dot, but look, it does look different. Show me that again.
It goes straight down.
It's a straight line?
The dot goes straight down.
For
for
some reason, yeah,
I
okay.
don't know why they did.
Okay. So Reb Meir says that it's considered a good marriage. And the stipulation is nullified. There's no stipulation there. Rabbi Yehuda says that stipulation is valid for money, but not for intimacy. In other words, they can make an arrangement, even though he's obligated to pay for her food. But if she agrees that she doesn't need his food, and that stipulation could work. But about intimacy, that they can't stipulate. They can't negotiate on that. She can't be meichel that. Amar Chizkiya. Okay, so what's our question? So our question is back to Reb Meir. Reb Meir said if someone sells his daughter into slavery and says on condition that you don't do yiyud, we said that it's a good, she's a slave and you can't do yiyud. 1 second, Reb Meir says that the Tanai is batal, that the stipulation is nullified. Chizkiya says that since in the pasuk it says the word la'ama, that he sells her as a slave, as a maidservant. We learned from the pasuk that sometimes he only sells her as a slave and not as a wife. Possible to get away with that. What are the rabbis that disagreed with Reb Meir? What do they say? They learned from the word la'ama. It says, they use it for what it says in a brisa la'ama. This teaches us that you can sell her as a slave even to someone that she's forbidden to marry. To marry, what would that be? Like a mamzer or a nasan, that they can't do the marriage. Balaydinu. I think Balaydinu is asking a question. Why do we need the pasuk for that? I would have a lot. It's logical. If he sells her in marriage to a mamzer, the marriage is effective. It was a violation, but it's effective. So of course he should be able to sell her as a slave to them, because the marriage would be effective. It says, it says 1 second. If he marries her, you can't say that that's a question, because just because he can marry her to psulim and it's effective, because a marriage is much easier to take effect, because a person can marry off his daughter even when she's over 12, before she's 12 and a half. Does that mean that he can sell her to people that are apostle? See, marriage is much easier to take effect because he can even sell her after 12. He can not sell her, he can marry her off after 12, but he can't sell her after she's 12. So Talmud Laimer la'ama. So therefore, we need a pasuk of la'ama malamich meichel psul. Let me just see if this worked out properly. We said la'ama tells us that she can sell it to psulim. We said 1 second. I don't need a pasuk for that. He can be mekadosh to psulim. Of course, he can sell it to psulim. He says no. Mekadosh to psulim doesn't tell me that he can sell it. So it comes the pasuk to tell me that he can sell it. Someone that's invalid. So, someone that you're not allowed to a marriage. Okay. Rabbi Eliezer Reimer, Rabbi Eliezer says, Im lalamid shemeichel psulim. If it's just coming to teach me that he's allowed to sell her to someone that's invalid to do a marriage, That I already have a pasuk. The pasuk says, "Imra beini adina," if she is bad in the eyes of the master, and the master does not want to do yid, he doesn't want to marry the slave girl. Why? Why is she bad? Why doesn't he want to marry her? Because she wasn't pretty enough. No, Shirah bin Nisuah, because it was an invalid marriage. That's why he didn't want to marry her. That's Rabbi Lezer's interpretation. So I already have a verse that tells me that he's able to sell her to someone that he wouldn't be allowed to marry. Right? Because then it says he doesn't want to marry her because it's a prohibition. So back to according to Rabbi Lezer, so what do I need? The word la'ama.
What is he's selling her for Kiddushin? If the person's puzzle, there is no Kiddushin.
No. Hustle doesn't mean that there's no Kiddushin. Hustle means that it's a prohibited Kiddushin. But they still have to get divorced. There's different levels. If someone marries his mother or his sister, we say there's no Kiddushin. But if he marries a mamzer or a nasin or someone, we say there's a Kiddushin, it was just prohibitive. If a Kohen Gadol marries a almana, we say it's a Kiddushin, they just have to get divorced.
The case where a Jewish woman marries a non-Jew,
There's
that's no Kiddushin.
There's no Kiddushin there.
So this is the
Yeah,
ones
so we're
where
saying
there is
puzzle means that there's a Kiddushin that's effective, it's just
So
a
the Kohen Gadol
prohibited.
has to get
Puzzle of a
divorced.
Russia.
A Kohen can get divorced, he just can't remarry her. Right. So matam malama. According to Rabbi Lezer, what do we do with the lama? Malamit shemaychra lekreivim. It's coming to teach us that he can sell her to close relatives, even though there is no such thing as kedushin. Rabbi Lezer is very lenient here. It says he can sell her even in a situation where where kedushin would be impossible. He can sell her to his let's say his father. The Gemara, yeah.
They were banned to create like a zera to prevent a marriage even with a close relative or someone also just so there wouldn't be a cost to create something that would be usher.
Means they want to set up a prohibition to sell it, a rabbinic prohibition. Because biblically, it's permissible. That's what you're asking. You're asking if the rabbis would. I think there's a rule somewhere that if we have a clear rule, clear biblical rule, the rabbis don't come in and say that it's prohibited. They won't make something forbidden if the Torah clearly tells me that it's permissible. If the Torah doesn't mention it, they could make a thing. But if the Torah clearly says that it's kosher, like for example, la'ama, you're allowed to, here, according to Rabbi Lezer, you're allowed to sell her even to relatives. Asking if the rabbis would come and say that even though the Torah said that it's prohibited, there's a Taz somewhere that says that the rabbis don't do that.
So how did they prohibit more than one wife?
Yeah, but it doesn't say clearly. Doesn't clearly say a second wife.
But all our others had said.
Oh,
That's not before the giving of the Torah.
But I thought all our others were saying the Torah. And you see, you're saying that. I mean,
Yeah,
every
but there's
time
answers.
another answer.
There's
for
answers.
the
later.
There's
answer.
answers for that.
office.
Welcome to the.
See you in the
Welcome.
office.
Slow.
Kings for that.
Kings
Yeah.
can do it.
They Trump cards. Three kings from four queens.
Vale Dinu. Isn't this logical? Why do we need a pasuk on top of chaf? If he can sell her to people that are invalid, in other words, in slavery, can't he sell her to relatives? Gemara says, wait 1 second. Over there, he can sell it to psulim because if he wants to do yud, he's able to, even though that would be prohibited. But how do you know that you can sell it to relatives? If he tries to do yid on his relative, it's not going to work. So Amar Cross, so therefore the pasuk says la'ama that yes, he can sell her into a relative. Okay. Reb Meir lepsulim. Reb Meir, what does Reb Meir do? Reb Meir said that La'ama taught me that he can make a condition that he's not going to make a condition. I'm selling her to you as a slave, but no marriage. L'psulim nafkalei mehechad nafkalei l'Rebbe Lezer. How does Rameir know that psulim would be acceptable? That he learns from the same place that Rebbe Lezer knows that psulim are acceptable. Where did Rebbe Lezer know that from? He only said that krayvim are acceptable. I guess he knew it logically. And how does Rebbe Meir know that krayvim work? Well, krayvim doesn't work, but krayvim savalik rabbanan damrim mechlik krayvim. So psulim, according to Rebbe Meir, will work, but he holds that but krayvim does not work. Relatives does not work. Tani Chada, there's one brisa that says he's able to sell his daughter to his own father as a slave. So the father would now have his granddaughter as a slave, but he can't sell his daughter to his son as a slave. He can sell his daughter to his father as a slave. Obviously, the father can't do yid because it's his granddaughter. But he cannot sell his daughter to his son as a slave. That's what one brisa says. Tani Yidach, the other brisa says, he can't sell it to his father or to his son. He can't sell it to those relatives. I understand the one that says he can't sell to the father, to the son as a slave, because Karabanan, that's following the opinion of the rabbis that hold he can't sell to relatives where yid is not effective, where there's no such thing as a marriage there. But who would that go like? You can sell it. Do you follow that you can't sell to relatives, or you can sell to relatives? Like Rabbanan, like Rebbe Lezer. It doesn't fit with the Rabbanan. According to the Rabbanan, you can't sell to the father. Like Rebbe Lezer, according to Rebbe Lezer, you're allowed to sell to the son. Lailam Karabanan, really, it's following the Rabbanan that says that you can't sell to relatives. However, why can you sell to the father? This is very interesting. Think about it. The father himself can't do yid. But let's say the father has another son. That son can yes do yid, because a girl is allowed to marry her uncle. So since there is a yid option there, the sale would be valid.
So the father would take it and pass it on to the other son.
Since there's a yid option, so the sale would be valid. What's wrong?
So if the father has another son, how's that the uncle?
Well, father has a son that has a daughter.
Oh, so it's
So
the
the father,
granddaughter.
the father, there's a father and a grandfather. The father sells his daughter to his father, the grandfather. Now the grandfather had another
He can't
son.
marry her, but
He can't marry his granddaughter, but the son, his other
use.
son can marry his niece.
She can marry her father's brother?
Yeah.
That's not one of the in the list.
No, that's an exception. Remember that. It is not.
I'm with you on that.
No. It's a so far the way we understand it is that it's just a betrothal. Oh, is it the same type of mitzvah like that? No. Yivam is much stronger. It affects you can't marry anyone else. It's not. This is just a positive command to do this. Okay. It's unclear what this means, and the Gemara explains if he comes in with his body, he goes out with his body. The Gemara is going to explain what that means. Rabbi Lezer ben Yaakov says Yechidi nechnas Yechidi yetze. What it means is he comes in alone, he goes out alone. Well, my begapa begufa. What is the meaning of begufa nechnas begufa yetze? What is the meaning of that term? That the Tanakama said if he comes in with his body, he goes out with his body. Amar Rava, so Rava explains Lemar. That means that by a non-Jewish slave, if an injury occurs, knocks off one of his limbs or something, well, he goes free. So what we're saying here is that by a Jewish slave, he does not go free. He has to finish the 6 years, and he gets a regular payment of whatever damages are, just like a regular Jewish person that gets injured. Amalei Abaya says, Hahu, that halacha, that he doesn't go free as a non-Jewish slave, that I know from another pasuk. It says by the Amma Evriya, by the Jewish maidservant, it says that she doesn't go free just like other slaves, which means she doesn't go free with injuries, which would mean that a Jewish slave, the same thing would apply, that he doesn't go free with injuries, not like a non-Jewish slave. Umar says, if you're going to learn from there, I could have thought that she doesn't go free with injuries like a non-Jewish slave, but she goes free with injuries like a non-Jewish slave, plus she gets money. Maybe she goes free and money. She doesn't just go free. Kamash Malan coming to tell me that they don't go free at all. Now, Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov says that comes in alone, the slave comes in alone, it goes out alone. What does it mean it goes out alone? Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak says this is what it means. That if he comes in with a wife and children, in other words, he's already married at the time, how to get all those debts? His wife and children. So that's why then Rabbi Maisley Shifta Kananis, and the master can give him a non-Jewish slave woman to mate with. But if he comes in as a single, and the master cannot give him.
Can his
Shifta
wife
Kananis.
and children live with him even if he's a slave?
Yeah, the master is supporting them as well. Taner Rabbana, and it was taught in the Bryce. Nimkar b'mana v'shpiach. Let's say he sold for 100 coins, but his value goes up. It's very hard. There's the what's it called? The lowest salary. What do they call that? Minimum wage. Minimum wage goes up. V'amad al Masayim, and now it's 200. Right? How do you know when you're trying to redeem him that you don't have to redeem him with the new minimum wage? You redeem him with the original minimum wage. From his money of his purchase, he can redeem himself. Nimkar b'masayim. Let's say he sold for 200.
Chicken and the egg store. You owe them back one egg, or you owe
Right.
chicken.
Potential. He got worth less. I don't know if this ever happens. This didn't have in history has minimum wage ever dropped. I don't think it's not possible. Okay, it goes down.
Have been the minimum.
So, how do you know that you use the second one? The new minimum wage, which is now dropped. You redeem him for less. According to the years that he has less, you redeem him. So I have one that tells me that you do it at the beginning. I have one that tells me that you do it according to what he has left. And I'm using it always for leniency in his redemption, which is not fair. Okay. Maybe I would say that this only applies to a slave that's sold to a non-Jew. Because the relatives are coming in to do the redemption. The non-Jew has the lower hand. He's always going to get the lower amount. But how do you know if he was sold to a Jew where he's redeeming himself? That we would say the same thing, that the Jewish person is going to get the lower, the Jewish master is going to get the lower amount. We learned this before, that there's a Gzeir Shava that says a worker, that the same laws apply. Amar Abaya says, I'm as great as Ben Azai was in the streets of Tveria. It's quite a statement. And it's so great. Abaya was in a very good mood.
He says that was a joke.
Is that what it says? I think it means he was like lightheaded. I think he expressed himself loosely.
Because he was a Charif.
Because Ben Azai would say I can answer any questions. He says all the Ben Azai said that all the sages are similar to me, like a peel of a garlic, except for Rabbi Akiva. He's one that I can't mess with.
No, he said,
Which is Rabbi Akiva.
yeah, I know, I'm just saying.
Except for the bald one. Okay. So Amalei Humer Rabbanan LaAbayas, one of the students tells Abayah Michti. Okay, let's see. Hanikra Yekal Midrashin Lakula Vika Midrashin Lachumra. These psukim, you could go lenient if you go strict. My chaz Midrashin Lakula. Why are you going lenient? Midrashin Lachumra, let's go strict. And let's redeem him only with the higher amount. Where it says, don't think like that. Mida akol rachman alagabe, because the Torah is very lenient on him. The Tanya was taught in a brisa. Because it's good with you, good for him with you. What does that mean? Imach b'maichal, he has to eat your food. Imach b'mishta, he has to eat you drink your drink. You can't be eating the clean bread, and he's going to be eating the black bread, pumpernickel. I don't know if that's what it means, but the not the quality. You're drinking old wine and he's drinking grape juice. You're going to sit on pillows. He has to sit on straw. From here they said, if you acquire Eved Ivri, it's like you've just acquired a master. Instead of acquiring a slave, you've acquired a master. Maybe we would say that this is only regarding while he's there, eat and drink. So that he shouldn't have pain. But regarding redemption, we should be strict on him, like Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina says. Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina says, come and look. Even the dust of Shvius, how strict it is. If a person does business on Shvius with the fruits of Shvius, which you're not allowed to do, you're not allowed to sell the fruits of Shemitah, it's supposed to be hefker. And then he's going to have to sell his possessions. Each man will return by the Yovel time. Each man will return to his inheritance. And next to it, it says, which is referring to things that are sold, tangible items, personality. He doesn't realize what he did wrong. And he doesn't realize that the reason why he had to make a yard sale, a garage sale, was because he was doing business with Shemitah, and that's why he now has to sell his things. In the end, he's actually going to have to sell his own fields. If your brother goes poor, we're talking about the order of the sequence of these sections in the Torah. At first, it starts off with Shemitah, then it starts off with selling items, then it starts off with selling property. Until he has to sell his own house. If he sells his house in a walled city. Why over there does it say, and the first time it says he didn't realize, and over here it says it didn't come to his hands. It says Ravuna. It's like Ravuna says. Ravuna says that if a person does a sin and then he does it a second time, it becomes permissible to him. Does it really become permissible to him? It becomes as if it's permissible. He's like, I do this all the time and nothing happens. So therefore it says it won't be until it comes to his hand, but not hirgish. Because the second time, of course, he doesn't realize. He thinks it's permissible. It will continue going until he has to sell his own daughter into slavery. That even though that this section it doesn't say it here, but nevertheless, we're teaching you a law that it's better to sell your daughter into slavery than to borrow money with interest. Why? Because my timer, because as the daughter works, she was able to work off the debt, and every day that passes, it's less and less There's less time for her there, and she's working it off. But when you borrow money every day, increases the debt, right?
The credit cards.
The credit card.
Minimum, you may pay the minimum in the meantime.
Right. This continues until he has to borrow money with interest. It says you should not take interest until he has to sell himself as a slave. And your brother is poor and he's sold to you. Not only is he not sold to you, but he's sold after this. He's sold to a stranger. It says he's sold to a stranger. It's not talking about a convert. Is talking about the non-Jew that lives in the land of Israel. This is actually referring to an idolater. When it says to an acre, he has to go and work for the idol itself. What is he doing over there? He's chopping wood for the idol. Not for the idol, I guess. Maybe for the idolater. Is it for the idolater or for the idol? Question is, why are we saying that we're lenient on the guy that on the Eved Ivri? Maybe we should really be strict on him. Because look, it's because of his sins that he ended up in this situation. Amarle Hasama Hadrikra, over there, the pasuk tells us that we're supposed to be lenient on, we're supposed to be compassionate. And the Tani the Bei Rabbi Yishmael taught in the yeshiva Rabbi Yishmael, maybe we should throw a stone after the one that's fallen. That's like take a olive down, right? So Talmud Laimar pasuk says, after he's sold, we should redeem him. One of his brothers should redeem him. Maybe you should only redeem him because we don't want him to be lost amongst the non-Jews. But regarding redemption, we should be strict about him. If he's by one of his brothers, we should be strict about him. So Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak we have two psukim. One pasuk says, if there's still many years. If there's a few years. Is there such a thing as a lot of years or a few years? Could it be more than 6 or less than 6? Rather, what it means is that if his price went up from the sale price, it means there was inflation. Then you go less according to the years. Maybe what it means is you pashle dalid, nasivle dalid, mikasav miknasai, avid dalid a pashle tarte, nasiv tarte kfishanov. Maybe it's not teaching me this. Maybe it's just telling me that you just pay for the amount of years that's left. Then the pasuk should have only said, "In my rabbi in ma'at nisha my bishanim, nisra bekaspe bishanim, mikaspe miknasai, despite kaspe bishanim kfishanov." That we're talking about that you go back, you either pay the higher price according to the way you pay the lower price according to the way it was sold, or you pay the lower price according to what it is now. Okay. Is this piece? Yeah, that's where it stops. That's the end of the. Let's leave it over here. 20B.